I want to try a very simple exercise today where I try to use the Objekt Physical Modeling Synthesizer to simulate 3 instrument samples that I've downloaded from freesound.org. I didn't care very much whether or not they were particularly high quality samples. I pretty much just grabbed the first few results I landed after searching. Now, if you're not familiar with Objekt, I recommend that you watch this video first. It's a great introduction to this really very interesting device. But if you are at all familiar with it, you know that it has 3 basic elements: the exciter, the modal resonator, and the 2 object resonators. For the purposes of this exercise, I'm really just going to stick to the exciter and the modal resonator, since the object resonators are highly nonlinear and, in my view, rather unpredictable. Now, I'm 100% sure that the object resonators are absolutely the best at generating interesting new sounds, but I just don't want to deal too much with trial and error here. I can actually show you the difference between the 2 resonator types by injecting white noise into the exciter stage and then feeding that into the modal and object sections separately. You'll see what I mean. Let me open up my trusty FabFilter twin synthesizer. I will wire the output of the twin into the external in on Objekt, and then make sure that I've set the key mode to mono. You can hear the synth here. Whoops! I had the object resonator on. Let me turn that down. Okay, now I will clear the default synth and select just one oscillator to be white noise. Okay. Now I'll pipe this noise into the modal resonator. You can see I have dialed in 4 integer harmonics here. And when I play, you can clearly see those 4 peaks in the spectrum. If I change the oscillator mode integers, then you can see the modes move around just like we would expect. And I don't have to stick to integers, of course. So the modal side is very much a what you see is what you get type of resonator. It's really just a set of filters for the exciter, so what we're getting is just kind of clean additive synthesis. Now, let me put this into the object side. I'll once again dial in the 4 integer harmonics. But since the object resonators are not filters, but rather timed delays, what comes out is very unpredictable. I can reduce the nonlinearity a bit by eliminating the crossover interactions between the modes. But I'm still getting way more harmonic information out than I put in. So this is really why I will stick to the modal side for this exercise. It may not be the greatest strategy for creative sound design, but it will make our lives easier for what we want to do. We can always dial in a bit of the object resonator just for color later if we want. Okay, let's take a look at the instruments I've chosen: a woodblock, a chime, and a plucked German zither. Here's the woodblock. Here's the chime. And here's the zither. Okay, let's start with the woodblock. I'll load up a fresh instance of Objekt and reset the device to get rid of the preset. Let's start by studying the spectrum of our woodblock. You can see I can freeze the spectrum using ProQ3, which is very useful. I've created a little spreadsheet that will let me record frequency and amplitude data for 8 of the harmonics. I pick 8 since I can only load Objekt with 8 modes. So I'll just hover my mouse over what looks like to be the fundamental to me and just record it here. Now, after I do that, you can see that column C automatically declares the fundamental to be 1. When I add higher frequencies, this column will calculate the ratio of that frequency to the fundamental frequency. This is good because that's exactly what I want to put into Objekt. I also need the relative amplitudes of the modes. I can read these off from ProQ3 on the vertical axis here, the loudness of the mode in decibels, but I need to convert that first to a gain, or an amplitude, which is in column E, and then I'll just renormalize so that whatever is the largest amplitude simply becomes 1, and this happens in column F. So column F is what I'll dial directly into Objekt. You can see here a formula for converting loudness into amplitude. Let me just very quickly show you how I derived that formula. Okay, now I just finished measuring them. And now to dial them into Objekt. Now, next comes a very important point. At this stage, I want to make sure that the MIDI note that I'm triggering off of here is C3 exactly. I'll explain why this is important later. Okay, let's have a listen. Let me pull up a spectrum of our new instrument here. The first thing I am noticing is that the pitch seems okay, so the woodblock sample is conveniently tuned to C, but it's an octave too low. I can fix that up here with this pitch value. I'll just slide it up to 12 to bump me up 1 octave. Okay, I have both spectra now, and I'll just toggle back and forth between the sample and our new instrument. It's not too bad, but you can see that the spectrum of the real woodblock is just more interesting, and it sounds more interesting too. It's not just 8 peaks. The peaks are rather oddly shaped, and there seems to be a whole lot of extra spectral content between the peaks. So what can we do? Well, one way is to add just a little bit of distortion. I can turn on a simulated pickup here and dial it in slowly, and that will saturate my signal just a bit and add some extra harmonic content. Oop, too much. There, that seemed like something. I can also modify some of the characteristics of my exciter, the frequency, the hardness of the stick or mallet. Now, let's compare again. It's actually pretty good. I think there is some subharmonic stuff going on in the original signal that I'm not getting, but I don't think I'm going to worry about that. Maybe I'll add a little room reverb to try and simulate the recording space a bit. Again, it's not a great recording, so at this point I'm just messing around. I can mess with the decay times a little bit. Okay, I think I'm happy with that, and we're probably tired of listening to it. So, diminishing returns, I think, if we go further, and we would be here all day. So let's move on. Let's listen to the chime sound. We can see two very clear dominant peaks followed by a bunch of little higher frequency peaks. We'll play the same game and start collecting our spectral info. Actually, this chime is rather high, so let me just start with the first harmonic to see if we're in the right ballpark. Okay, that's way too low. Let's see where raising the pitch gets us. I still don't think that's high enough. But unfortunately, it is as far as Objekt will let us go. So maybe what I can do is just raise all my frequencies here in the ratio column. If I multiply the whole column by 2, that will take us up another octave. Let's see if we're closer. Okay, I think we went too far, and the note sounds wrong as well. Okay, that sounds like the right note and octave to me now. Let me turn up the decay. Yeah, okay. So now we continue our game. And dialing them in. Okay, let's see where we are. Actually, one more thing. You see how the higher harmonics are decaying much more rapidly than the fundamentals? We can dial that in too. Oops, I forgot the amplitudes. Okay, not bad. The exciter is wrong. I need a different mallet. Increasing the frequency seems to help. Okay, I'll stop here. Again, diminishing returns at this point. Okay, there's something important I've forgotten. Of course, we don't want to always just play one note, so let's see what happens if we move away from the C3 trigger, going back to the woodblock. At the moment, as I change the pitch, all the harmonics change along with the pitch. This turns out to not be very realistic. As you change the size of a woodblock, sure, the fundamental will change, but not all of the harmonics. Some of them are sort of baked into the wood, or may be related to how the block is mounted to a stand, or maybe how the wood sound somehow interacts with its environment. And these should not change as I change the pitch of the woodblock. They are the so-called formant frequencies. Of course, my sample is just one strike, so I don't really know which exact frequencies to choose as the formants, but my hunch is that they are mostly in the higher register. So I will unbind some of the higher frequencies from the MIDI keyboard. That's what KBD stands for here in Objekt, and see how that changes the overall sound as I move the pitches around. So you can see if I unbind all of them, then I always get the original C3. By the way, that was why it was so important to only trigger the instrument C3 when we were dialing in the modes. If I just bind the fundamental, then it moves while the other frequencies stay tied to C3. That's not quite right either, so I'll choose the first few and see what sounds most convincing to me. Okay, that seems better. Now let's do the same for the chime. Oh wait, before I do, we would still like our instrument to be in tune with the MIDI keyboard. If I click the analyzer, then that's what Objekt will check for us. In this case, we were lucky, no retuning required, but if we had needed to, we would have just clicked Fix at this point. Now the chime. Same drill. That seems okay. Now this one does need a tuning fix. You'll notice when I click Fix, the mode values that are bound to the keyboard will change, while the formants will not. Don't click this until you are absolutely done with the simulation. That's good. They are now tuned to the MIDI keyboard. Okay, finally the zither. I took the liberty of dialing in the peaks and amplitudes already. You can see that the harmonics do indeed form an integer series this time, unlike the previous instruments. This is very typical for strings, pipes, and voices. Oh, whoops, forgot my spectrum analyzer. Let me add it. Okay, let's see where we are. Not exactly a dead ringer. I do think the saturation is important here. I'll fix the tuning. Well, one thing I would like to change anyway. I don't like the way this sounds so much like a hammered instrument. I think we should make it sound a bit more like it was plucked with a pick or a fingernail. So we can turn the diffusion on. Well, I like this sound anyway, so I think I'm going to stop. If we wanted to match this better, we may add some extra harmonics. I did stop at 8. Or we could maybe try funneling some of this into Object and just do some experimenting. But I think I will just call this done. I've created a few MIDI rolls for these 3 instruments. Oh, and by the way, I did a little extra processing. For the woodblock, I added some delay and reverb. For the chime, I added some juicy reverb. And for the zither, I added some distortion and stereo ping-pong style delay. Let me turn it up. I really like this sound now. And there we go. Let's hear how these instruments sound in a full mix. I only included them towards the beginning of this song, but I'll play the whole thing anyway. Enjoy, and thanks for watching.